Welcome to our 5 on 5. Please be joined by Senator Jeff Merkely today. Senator, good to see you.
Oh, it's great to be with you.
Thanks for taking the time. I know it's a busy time right now in D.C. So I guess I want to start with your work as a senator. What's the one thing you're most proud of as a U.S. senator that's helped Oregonians?
Well, it changes from moment to moment, but right now it's the work on Oregon's agriculture. I was able to set the motion in motion, the legalization of hemp, which will be $1 billion economy for Oregon this year. And in the appropriation bill that we just passed through the committee, and I'm the lead Democrat on that, we have assistance to rural Oregon, rural housing, because that's included in the ag bill. Also helping with the dredging over on the coast, the research for important crops in Oregon, just a whole host of things, dryland wheat farming, that assist with our ag economy.
And the House recently passed your bipartisan Safe Banking Act to make banking services available to legal cannabis businesses. Will this become law?
I am pretty optimistic because the chair of the committee, the banking committee in the Senate, who had been opposed, has come around on it. And he says he has some tweaks he wants to make on a couple related topics. I've talked them over with him. I'm going to have more conversations, and I think we have a really good chance of getting it done.
You mentioned the Appropriations Committee that you're on. It funds many topics relevant to Oregonians, obviously including hemp, but also housing. Homelessness is an issue across Oregon, as you know. What is the Fed doing to help the problem? Well,
so we had a couple big victories related to homelessness. The biggest grant program was increased by $125 million. I advocated intensely for that. The other federal programs that the housing community tells me are most important to homelessness are rental assistance. There's one that's based connected to the tenant, and one that's based connected to a particular housing complex. Together those were increased by $1.8 billion. Spread across the country. It's a modest amount under a restricted budget environment, but it still shows that we're starting to gain traction and the recognition that affordable housing is a really big issue for the success of our families.
We're going to take a quick commercial break. We have a lot to talk about of what's going on in D.C. right now, internationally as well. We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to our 5 on 5. Again, we're here with Senator Jeff Merkely. Senator, acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney acknowledged President Trump held up Ukraine aid partly for political reasons Thursday, saying, quote, "Get over it. There's going to be a political influence in foreign policy," end quote. He attempted to walk it back later in the evening, saying there was no quid pro quo. Are you over it?
Absolutely not. The idea that our government is reaching out to get foreign assistance in an election is totally unacceptable to our system. Our founders were terrified of foreign countries having a huge influence, and so they really built into the Constitution an understanding that this was unacceptable. It's certainly rare in American history for a good reason, because the executive has a responsibility to never allow that type of influence on American elections. In this case, they were not only allowing it, they were soliciting it.
The president wants the House to vote on impeachment. Speaker Pelosi is holding out. She's in no rush. Are you happy with the timeline and how this is playing out?
Well, I did feel that there was a previous point in time when the Mueller report actually became public, not when the administration described it, when it actually became public. And when it had in it 4 cases in which substantial evidence of obstruction of justice, including one of witness tampering, I felt under the vision, the very important American principle of equal justice under law, that was a time the House needed to act, and they didn't. I was disturbed because this principle of equal justice is only exists in reality if there's accountability. So the House is now acting basically driven by a different topic, as you mentioned, the issue of soliciting foreign interference in our election. Mm-hmm. I think they need to act. They need to act reasonably quickly, get done. This shouldn't drag into next year. Next year we have an election, and then the Senate will have to struggle with how to go forward.
The White House announced yesterday the president will host next year's G7 summit at a Trump property in Florida. Democrats, like yourself, are upset by this, saying the president's lining his pockets. Is there anything Congress can do?
Well, they can. In fact, I announced yesterday that I will introduce a bill next week saying that the executive branch cannot book events at facilities that are owned by the president. This is another constitutional issue. It's called emoluments, that fancy word we really never heard of until the last couple of years. But it's a very serious American principle that there cannot be a financial interest in how the executive branch conducts itself, and this violates that.
Will any Republicans support that bill?
I hope so. I hope so. We'll find out.
Okay, good to see you. Thanks so much for being here, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Stay with us. We'll be right back.